In order to make America great again, he would have to make it white again.
So the last time I looked at this guy on my channel, he was just as despicable as he is here now, but at that point he at least attempted to mask his bile behind the pseudoscience of race realism. Now, he's decided that with Trump's second term, he really has no need to hide his bigotry anymore, and has truly gone full mask off. For those who don't know this guy, this is Jared Taylor. The guy is the polite, well-spoken, pseudo-intellectual who bigots love to point to for supposedly intelligent rhetoric around white nationalism. Think of him as the Jordan Peterson of the neo-Nazis. He is genuinely an absolutely disgusting excuse for a human being, and so much of the rhetoric he exposed can be found in the manifestos of some of the worst mass shooters you can think of in recent history, like the ones from Christchurch, Buffalo, and Charleston. He's the editor of American Renaissance, a white supremacist magazine that's seen a renaissance of its own over the past decade, as the shit that they peddle has been pushed further and further into mainstream discourse.
Diversity is a constant source of tension and conflict.
At every organization that tries to make diversity a priority, whether it be Harvard that ignored the Students for Fair Admission course, you lower excellence and you elevate diversity, which lowers the flourishing and the capacity for any organization, company, or group of people to be the best versions of themselves.
So I originally started putting this video together before the incident in Utah regarding Charlie Kirk actually happened. And I did just want to point out that Jared Taylor here, interestingly enough, gave a lot of talking points to both Charlie and to Nick Fuentes as well. So much of his rhetoric is able to disseminate to the populace at large through voices like those of Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes. And as we go into this video, you'll see and how frequently Jared Taylor's calls to action sound a lot like calls to violence or stochastic terrorism. These calls to violence are not spoken into the void. They do have real-world implications and consequences because when listened to, believed, and acted upon by the right or wrong person, depending on your perspective, the consequences can be absolutely enormous.
On May 14th of 2022, this defendant displayed a callous disregard for human life. He drove over 200 miles out of his way with one mission, with one goal, to kill as many black people as possible. During that 3-hour drive, he could have turned around, but he wouldn't be deterred. He was steadfast to accomplish his goal of killing as many black people as possible and starting a race war. He fed into propaganda and lies that convinced him that somehow these innocent people who he had never heard of, who had never heard of him, who had never had a conversation with him, who had never even met him, were a threat to his very existence and identity as a white man. The defendant executed 10 people and wounded 3 others in slightly over 2 minutes. The only time he expressed a scintilla of remorse or regret is when he apologized to Christopher Braden, a white man, for shooting him. Any statement of expression or remorse at this point, any tears, fall flat in the face of such violent actions.
So as I go into this video, it's just food for thought to consider not only what he has to say, but who he's saying it to and what those people are willing to take from his rhetoric and turn it into.
I, of course, stand before you an American, and it would be hard to be more American than I am. The first Taylor came to the North American colonies in 1635. We have voted in every election, we have fought in every war, and of course, during the terrible fratricidal civil war that we had, all of my male ancestors of military age fought for the Confederacy. So, North America is drenched with our blood, stuffed with our bones. I am as American as it is possible to be.
Of course, This is not at all surprising, but it also shows exactly what kind of audience he's speaking to. An audience where he can take pride in proclaiming his love of bigotry and hate, and his long history of supporting the South, the slavery, and every other type of prejudice you can imagine.
Everything about our culture, our heritage, everything that is good about America came from Europe. You are the mother country, and in that sense, or the mother continent. And in that sense, I feel I am just as European as everyone else in this entire room. We are part of that great world brotherhood of Europeans. We face the same challenges, we have the same history, and we will share a common destiny, whether it is a success or a failure. We are all in this together. Now,
yeah, saying that everything great came from Europe is a pretty bold statement to make. Unsurprising coming from, well, you, but all the best food, all the best music, all the best literature. Really? Sure. Believe what you want to, my man. I'm not surprised, like I said.
now, I have been standing up for white people for 35 years. As one of the younger comrades said about me, he has been speaking for our people before it was even cool. Well, I'm glad to know that perhaps it's now cool. And I was not always optimistic. There were times when I thought all I was doing was making a record, so that when the compilers of the great Chinese Encyclopedia of World History, when they came to the chapter about the white man and whatever happened to the white man, maybe some diligent scribe somewhere would discover that not all of us were fools and cowards.
See, now this is an interesting point to look at, because here you're just getting a real sense of how focused Jared is on this bizarre notion of how historians in the future are going to look back on his legacy and show that whatever our society may look like in the near or distant future, that there were some people that were desperately holding on to the preservation, not of the Germans, not of the Irish, not of the English, not of the Nords, not of the Slavic people, but of the white people. Because that's what Jared truly cares about. It genuinely doesn't matter what the culture is of the region that you came from, as long as it's a white culture. He doesn't care if a person from Switzerland marries a person from Spain, or if a person from Germany marries a person from England. He doesn't care about the culture of any given region as long as it's a European region. He doesn't care on that level. He only cares if a person from Ireland marries a person from Africa, or a person from South America travels across the border into a country that he's deemed is supposed to be a white country, in spite of the fact that it never has been and never will be. Usually when Jared talks, he tries to mask his narrative in the pseudoscience of race realism. And to be honest, it's nice when he can get an opportunity to debunk his rhetorical bullshit. But that's not this video. In this environment, when he's talking to his people, he truly has no problem going full mask off and demonstrating to his audience that the issue isn't culture, it's not society. The only thing that Jared has ever and will ever care about is the amount of melanin in your skin, because that's what truly matters to him. In his eyes, the only true America is a white America. The only people of real value that need to preserve their value by not intermingling with other cultures and other people is white societies. In other words, European societies. He'll give lip service on the merits of other communities, particularly Asian communities. But the fact is that he has a very simplistic view on race overall. Because although science can show the genetic diversity and specific variations between a myriad of different communities of people, those differences can be found distinctly between different groups of white people. And the fact is that every community, no matter how diverse geographically or racially they may be, if they're outside of Africa, their genetic diversity is minuscule in comparison to just two communities inside of Africa that might only be a few thousand miles apart from one another. Because, again, his entire racial framework that he puts everything into has nothing to do with genetics. It really has nothing to do with biology. At a fundamental level, it is now, has always been, and always will be the color of your skin. And by God, he is going to be sure that the historians in some distant future time are going to know that he stood up for the melanin deficient people the world over.
I'm not just leaving traces in the sand for someone else to find. I feel as though we are now part of a movement that has a genuine chance of succeeding. So I am by nature an optimist, some might say a foolish optimist, but now I believe we have real reasons for optimism. What are some of these reasons? One, I must say, is the election of Donald Trump. Now, it was good for a whole host of reasons, but one is that it showed that American white people are capable of defying their rulers, because every part of the establishment terribly hated Donald Trump. Certainly the second time around, we were warned, this man is a fascist. And even shortly before the election, 2/3 of the Americans, according to polls, believed that Donald Trump is a fascist. And they voted for him anyway. Now, does that mean they understand what fascism is? Or does it mean they just don't care what the head table is telling them? And if enough white people were prepared to vote for a man that they were told over and over was this horrible, wicked person, was ruin the country, then there is no telling what white people might be prepared to do next.
Now, this is a fascinating thing to look at because he is right. There were a lot of people on the left that were saying that Trump was going to be a fascist. All the people on the left were saying that Trump was going to be terrible for the country as a whole. And it seems like the right had two different takes on the entire topic. And that was either that this was hyperbolic and exaggerating and that he wasn't going to be as bad as everybody was going to say he was, or in the case of people like Jared here, they were hoping that he was going to be as bad as he actually is, if not worse, that he was going to uphold a lot of the truly reprehensible stuff that he was claiming that he was going to support when he was on the campaign trail. Or better yet, that he was going to go mask off after he was elected and put into office and go to an even further extreme than what he was proclaiming he was willing to do while he was trying to moderate himself on the campaign trail. And it turns out that the exact same thing that's giving Jared here so much hope terrifies the rest of us more rational human beings, because he did, in fact, really go full tilt with the authoritarianism, with the mass deportations, and the impact that's having on our economy, on our constitution, on our country as a whole, is clear as day for everybody to see. And the fact that a person like Jared is looking at that situation and cheering it on gives you a good idea of exactly both how reprehensible he is as a human being and how dangerous the ideology that he espouses can really be. And part of what put this man into office was the exact kind of rhetoric that Jared here likes to push. If it's dressed up in just the right way, it can be brought to a much more mainstream audience. And now, the repercussions of that are being felt all over the place. Farmers are losing their crops, and in turn losing their farms as a direct result of this type of behavior. All because people like this decided that they're not American enough because they don't have quite the right amount of melanin in their skin. Anyways, let's continue.
Donald Trump is to me in many ways a mystery. He is certainly not one of us. I think he has probably thought systematically and seriously about only two things: New York real estate and seducing women. Those are the only things I think he's ever thought seriously about. But he has certain instincts. He seems to have an instinct for the fact that Muslims will not make good Americans. No, he seems to understand that. He also seems to understand that people should not just waltz across the border into the United States and go on welfare. He has an instinctive, visceral hatred for this kind of thing. But does he understand race in any serious way? Does he understand that in order to make America great again, he would have to make it white again?
Yeah, like I said, no subtlety in this speech. He truly thinks that making America a good place to live means making it white, or as white as humanly possible. Sorry, in Jared Taylor terms, as white as humanly possible. I will admit here, he's right to an extent. Trump is far too much of a narcissist to be this particular breed of bigot. He hates most people equally. The only person that Trump genuinely cares about is Trump. That being said, he does know how to thrive off of this kind of anger. He can bring people who genuinely hate people for the color of their skin into the folds of the MAGA movement and hide it under the mask of these massive deportations being about getting rid of criminals, welfare leeches, and the like.
Because they put all their criminals into the good old USA.
But now, with the economic costs of this idiotic behavior coming to fruition, it's only people like this, people like Stephen Miller, who are happy to keep cutting off their own noses just to spite their face.
But, of course, he was vastly better than the alternative, this half-Hindu alternative that was almost shoved down our throat. I really was afraid that that woman would win, and it was a wonderful thing that she did not. Now, once in office, however, Donald Trump, who again is not one of us and never will be, he took all the measures that a racially conscious white man would do. It is quite remarkable the things he's done.
Jared here seems to take so much glee in what's happening because, first and foremost, the impact will have zero effect on Jared. The man has never worked a day in his life. His only marketable skill is feeding hatred to an audience of bitter people who have been looking for a scapegoat.
He has made illegal entry into the United States almost zero. Almost zero. The first time in decades, nobody is coming across.
Secondly, because this ideology of his matters more to him than anything else, including the economy, makes it so that even as Americans suffer the consequences of feeding into this bigotry, as we see money from tourism, foreign labor, foreign students all completely dry up, billions of dollars for almost every state, the dollar losing 11% of its value versus foreign currency over just the past 6 months. A man like Jared here can genuinely see this as a good, because it means a more white America, or as he would put it, a more white America. It's also a poorer America, an America with fewer civil liberties, an America with fewer jobs, more homeless, soldiers literally patrolling the streets, but it's a white America. And hey, at least that, as he puts it, half Hindu didn't win, right?
He immediately tried to get rid of birthright citizenship. This will be decided ultimately by the Supreme Court, but this is a hugely important thing from our point of view.
Yeah, of course, Jared sees ending birthright citizenship as an innate good. But only now that it's not primarily benefiting white people. Back when the immigrants were Irish or Italian or German, then it was a different story. Of course, the rhetoric was identical. These groups were also seen as a blight on American culture, supposedly, and their birthright citizenship was also contested. But of course, back then, it was just racist propaganda to call the Irish and Italians thugs and criminals. Now it's legitimate science that this particular generation of immigrants are thugs and criminals, that totally don't deserve birthright citizenship. Because that's science. It's really amazing to see this level of confidence in an absolute fiction. And the comments on this video just show that people are eager to eat it up with gusto.
We also have something called temporary protected status in the United States. And there are hundreds of thousands of people who have come from countries, and then the previous administrations have said, we can hardly send these poor dears back to their devastated Haiti or Venezuela or Somalia. Donald Trump has, by a stroke of the pen, gotten rid of that. 350,000 Venezuelans, we don't want them. 521,000 Haitians, no. 15,000 Afghans, a total of nearly 1 million people. He says, you got to clear out. This is really quite without precedent, this kind of massive threat of deportation. Also, as you know, and I'm sure Europe has the same problem, oftentimes we have decided that we don't want this person in our country, and yet the place from where he came refuses to take him back. In some cases, Donald Trump has succeeded in making the Venezuelans, for example, take back their undesirables. But when he has not succeeded in doing that, he has sent them to the strangest places. I've heard of Iranians and Chinese sent to Panama. And they go to Panama. And in this particular case, they were held in some hotel for a while and then just released into the jungle. And I hope every one of those Chinamen and Iranians writes back and says, hell, I'm in the Panamanian jungle. I thought I was in the land of milk and honey. And apparently the same thing has been done with some to Djibouti. There's some stuck in Djibouti on their way to South Sudan. This is marvelous, marvelous. Who would have thought of doing such a thing?
Yikes. Yeah, like I said, he's really gone full mask off here. He's literally watching people being thrown into foreign lands they have no connection to and sees it as a wonderful thing. Because in Jared's mind, America as a nation of immigrants is only a wonderful thing when it's a nation of white immigrants. In my last video about this guy years ago, I was able to refute his nonsense with evidence, but with this one, it's much less of an argument, more just praising Trump for catering to his bigotry, the bigotry that he's been selling for decades. So there's a lot less to argue about. I mean, if you can see renditioning refugees to foreign lands with zero access to due process, it's not like there's much to say. It's so fundamentally un-American and reprehensible that it's not really something to cite statistics or data over. As a matter of fact, where was one of the last iconic examples of taking people and imprisoning them in camps far away from their homeland? Oh, right. I remember that. Like I said, the mask is fully off with Jared.
This has been in terms of cleaning the country of illegals. He's also instituted this process of encouraging self-deportation. We will pay you to bugger off, and if you stick around, we will fine you instead. All of this is a kind of vigorous expression of cleaning out people in the United States who are here illegally, and it's been absolutely marvelous.
Now here's a fun fact. Refugees aren't here illegally, you dingus. Of course it helps Jared to peddle his narrative when he conflates everyone and anyone here as being here illegally. But refugees are coming here and trying to do things the right way with our broken immigration system. They come here, get temporary status, then jump through all the hoops needed to become recognized as American citizens. But now they're getting rounded up at immigration courts, with ICE agents literally grabbing people that are coming to courts. People that are trying to do things the right way, and then shipping them off to places that they have absolutely no connection to, draining a massive part of our labor force that often ends up taking the jobs that others aren't willing to take, starting businesses that generate jobs, revenue, tax income for the American coffers. But in Jared's mind, if you're fleeing a war-torn, blighted part of the world, don't you dare come here, no matter what amount of benefit your presence may provide. I mean, just for an example, look at the South Korean workers that were mass deported. Those people were there to train Americans to operate the systems that were being used to run those factories. They were there to literally create jobs, and in spite of providing an absolute benefit to the company that they were there for and the community that they were in. But who cares? They weren't white, so it's all good.
And then, and this is an aspect of the United States that probably many of you are familiar with in an abstract way, but don't realize how far absurd anti-white policies have become implanted into every aspect of American life, every function of government. You would not believe how far that has gone. But Donald Trump and the people around him have tried to get rid of absolutely every one of these things. And one example is his order to every part of the government not to celebrate Martin Luther King's birthday. This may seem like a small thing to Europeans, but there are only 2 personal birthdays that are celebrated in the United States as national holidays. That of Jesus Christ and Martin Luther King. Those are the only 2.
President's Day. You forgot that one. We set it to the 3rd Monday in February instead, so it's always on a Monday. But yeah, you forgot that one. You know, the one that was built on George Washington's birthday. Also, we really have no idea when Jesus was born. We celebrated on the 25th thanks to the winter solstice, but that's not something that anybody does know, can know, or could possibly have an idea of. We don't have a birth date for Jesus. Sorry to burst your bubble. Anyway, you were saying something about how bad it is to celebrate the greatest civil rights advocate in modern American history. Do go on about that.
This black fornicator, this black plagiarist, this black communist who didn't really believe in the tenets of Christianity is practically a deity in the United States. And to have taken the position that no government organization is going to celebrate his birthday, this is really quite a radical thing.
Yep, there it is. That's the Jared that we all know and revile. Calling him a communist and unchristian is particularly ironic considering how much Jesus advocated for the poor, and saying that he's not really a Christian, though not at all surprising, is exactly why the modern American right is so fundamentally unchristian in its values. Leave it to Jared here to vilify a literal reverend while praising a guy like Trump.
What form our salvation, if I can use that word, will take. But what I can say with confidence is that we simply have to ensure that more white people agree with us. It's a matter of numbers. And when enough white men and white women understand what's at stake and they rekindle a sense of who they are, then things will fall into place in a way that we cannot predict. But I feel confident that they will.
This is really fascinating in a perverse sort of way, because so much of right-wing podcasting, or many of the voices that you hear in that realm, has made it more palatable to the mainstream, so that even when people will vehemently say that they don't agree with a person like Mr. Taylor here, they espouse so many of his arguments and so many of his notions in slightly different ways, in a slightly reworded format. Because again, he's trying to get people to think like him. Jared is aspiring to, in so many of his videos and so many of his speeches and so many of his conversations, is to a large extent taking hold in many facets of American society. And it's been disturbing to see that regression of basic empathy. I fear how long it's going to take to even get us back to a baseline of sanity that we were able to experience before this type of sentiment came to the mainstream.
Compared to when I started, compared to maybe just 10 years ago, there has been a remarkable flourishing of groups organizations, influencers, all of whom understand so much of what's going on, who it seems by the time they're 20 or 25, they know more than I knew when I was 50 years old.
Yeah, sadly, Jared is right here that this is a sentiment that's coming more and more into the mainstream. There's a larger and larger movement of individuals that actually follow this kind of rhetoric and nonsense. But the same could be said about incels, about Christian nationalists, hell, about flat earthers. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's any more of a compelling narrative, that it has any more of a grounding or basis in reality. It simply means that the rhetoric is becoming more and more appealing to a certain subset of people. That fact, A, is not a good thing, and B, is definitely not a demonstration of the quality of his arguments. It's simply a demonstration of how bad our critical thinking skills are as a nation, and how prevalent so much resentment and genuine hatred for certain groups of people has become among so many individuals within our society. So yeah, you're right, Jared. But the rest of us in the world are looking at this not as something to be praising or something to be proud of. But by all means, do go on.
One of the most important things that we are doing is something that our first speaker from Sweden was talking about, building communities. Building communities of white people, where white people can live together and to do what I think is in fact the most important thing, and that is to build institutions and communities for white children. These are groups of committed white people who get together, try to build homes next to each other, buy plots of land, set up a legal structure that they can control so that they can discriminate in a legal way as who is part of this. Because certainly in the United States, for an individual white person, or a couple, or even a family, we can build a psychological fortress against all of the poisons, all of the deceits, all of the misrepresentation that comes our way. We can even laugh at it. But children cannot. And even if you are a child in a racially conscious family, if you're in isolation, you may go to public school and you will be beaten into submission.
Yeah, you heard that right. He's advocating for white-only communities. And in this era, in this political and social climate, there's a genuine appetite for it. Notice how he speaks about how great things have become over the past 10 years. It's no coincidence that this is the same time frame where we've seen a massive influx of violence from racially motivated actors. I mean, in 2022 alone, approximately 80% of right-wing extremist violence came from white nationalists. They feel like Trump has given them a green light for their bullshit.
Eric Orwell is looking for like-minded people mainly on platforms like X or on Rumble or on YouTube to move to the 160-acre compound. He tells us that so far 40 people have moved here and hundreds have joined, paying a one-time $25 membership fee and earning acceptance after sharing information online about their ethnic background.
I mean, just look at Jared here speaking now compared to how he's spoken in events only a few years ago.
20,000. Is that a racial success?
I'm saying that is the sign of a nation trying to get past the initial problems that result because of the fear we have of people who are different.
That is cuckoo.
You think it's cuckoo? Well, yes. I didn't challenge your sanity. But yes, sir.
Well, I'm challenging yours.
Wait.
At this point, there's no attempt at subtlety in their rhetoric, and it's all on full display.
That in order to make America great again, he would have to make it white again.
Granted, Jared may be articulate, but he's never been very subtle with his bigotry. But at this point, there's zero benefit in hiding behind any form of ambiguity. They want whites-only communities, and they're willing to get that by any means necessary. They want their own indoctrination camps. Schools, where their children won't be broken down with the facts that an actual education would provide. because they're aware that this bullshit only survives and thrives in insular spaces, isolated from other cultures, critical assessment, and counterpoints.
Our positions are natural, normal, healthy, and supremely moral. I had the foolish idea that if all I did was explain things in an understandable and almost loving kind of way, well, very soon people would, oh, of course he's right. Of course. Oh, well, it didn't work out that way at all.
Yikes. There's a lot to unpack here. First off, natural, normal, and moral. So it's natural for a country taken from its indigenous non-white population, propelled to the forefront of military and economic power through its embracement of multiculturalism, to now, 2 centuries later, have people like yourself advocate for an ethnostate. Make that make sense. Actually, don't even bother. I know your talking points well enough to know just how painfully stupid that endeavor ends up being. Instead, you've tapped into a resentful and angry generation of young men who are pissed off that they've been economically shafted by the American oligarchy, and those people have decided that your pet scapegoats are the perfect enemy to fixate on, and thus your narrative has spread to the mainstream. Congratulations.
Nice looking, good jobs, girlfriends, wives, families, a completely different brand of white people. And some of them, well, sometimes they're good enough to say to me that I've been an inspiration to them. I say, no, you are an inspiration to me. There's only one good thing about getting old, and that's the fact to see all of these wonderful young people who seem committed, who are committed, and who know so much and are prepared to do so much. I tell you, I would give anything to be 40 years younger and stay in this fight another 40 years, because I may not live to see the promised land, but I believe there will be a promised land.
Sadly, he is right when he talks about people attending events like this. It's not just the obviously degenerate cretins that one mentally pictures. They're still cretins, but they dress better, they sound more articulate, and they've digested the narrative and become completely confident in regurgitating it like it's gospel.
Many of these young people, and some who are even older, I think if they believed that by their death they could save the race, they would march laughing into Valhalla. I believe many are committed to that extent.
And then there's this disgusting little cherry on top at the end of this whole mess. We get this. Like I said, Jared seems to have given up subtlety, either due to age or due to the audience here or due to what he sees from this government. But whatever the case is, he is not being discreet in advocating for outright violence to achieve his goal of preserving the white race.
Of course, we must work with the spirit of our ancestors who fought for our race in a different way, because all of you, every one of you, you have the blood of heroes in your veins. The Spartans who fought the Persians, they are our people. The Franks who turned back the Moors at Poitiers in 732, they are our people. The people who defended Vienna in 1683 against them, they too are our people. The Boers who fought at Blood River, all those are our people. And just as they did what was needed, just as they stood for their people and fought and died, we must, with that mentality, do what we do now in face of what I believe is the greatest crisis our race has ever faced.
After the tragedy in Minneapolis, there's so many Muppets on the right trying to claim that the trans ideology is driving people into violence. That obviously it's the radical left that's causing all this hate and division and violence and the mass shootings. It's all the left, the left, the left. Meanwhile, Jared Taylor made this speech only a few months ago. His magazine has been an inspiration to a huge array of very, very violent mass murderers. His magazine has the talking points that were inspirations to a huge array of some of the worst. Buffalo, Charlotte, Jacksonville, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Orlando, Utøya, all of them took talking points from this exact kind of rhetoric. even from Taylor himself. Jared Taylor will never be the one actually spilling blood, but I hope that it's easy to see that with rhetoric like this, just how much blood is on this guy's hands. It's stochastic terrorism in action, and the rhetoric has stopped even attempting to be subtle. So with all that being said, again, all I'm left to say is buckle up, because we're not even a year into this disaster-driven administration, and things have only begun to get bad. So if you're still here, thanks for listening. Thanks for taking the time to listen, and I'll see you all in the next one.